work with a number of a student I've been lecturing a little while ago contacted me and asked me for some thoughts, some advice about getting into conservation. And she was describing all the steps she had taken to find her career, to find her space. And I couldn't fault her in terms of the things that she'd said she'd done. So I do, appreciate that maybe it's always been a challenging time, but it is difficult trying to get a foothold in this fantastic area, very diverse area of work. And I hope we can go a little way anyway in this webinar to help you in your thinking, in your development, in your journey in biodiversity conservation.
Great, guys. So now let's go into the part. And I would like to know, as any of us working in conservation, we have been moved in some way or in some moment of our career for a very particular moment. So I wonder about what's that moment for you? What was the first thing that inspired you to get involved into conservation efforts?
You want to take that first, Isabelle?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think I really resonate with the challenges and barriers you talked about, but maybe that's for later, Jamie. But with what really inspired me as a young conservationist, especially growing up in Singapore in a city, um, one would assume that we don't have a lot of biodiversity, we don't have a lot of nature. Um, but I but we actually do relative to the area, and also um, developing a sense of compassion and curiosity to its biodiversity kind of started from having access to planet Earth, or Animal Planet and National Geographic, and the accessibility of nature documentaries that really spurred that passion. And I suppose as I matured and as I grew older, to know the difference or to know the nuances in the conservation field, um, there is this innate responsibility of reversing anthropogenic threats to species. Um, you're aware of human-induced threats, what development is able to impact species, but more so how can we coexist, and how to be able to um, practice conservation as a collaborative effort. And I do love the field of conservation, and that is so dynamic. It covers a broad range of roles and research, socioeconomic, being able to bring livelihoods to people. And you're also looking at behavioral change in why people do things the way they do, or why are people involved in trade, for example. Um, and being able to have both compassion for people and animals. Um, so I guess that started out as an unrealistic goal of saving species, but then it kind of became a more realistic, measurable action in trying to just be a part of something bigger, like a bigger movement. And so I think when Jamie was talking about finding a niche, it took 9 years being a conservation graduate to actually being now a facilitator in the conservation field. Yeah, that's me.
It's difficult to follow that, Isabelle, and I'd like to come across as being as compassionate, as sort of altruistic as you were. I think for me, I don't think I ever really thought about it, to be honest. And maybe it was a very different era. You know, it would have been, I guess, I remember running a jumble sale, which is like a sale of sort of secondhand clothes and things like that, which I gathered from around my village. and raising money for the World Wildlife Fund. And I would have been about 11, I think, when I did that. Now, whether I ran it, or whether my parents actually did it, I don't really know. But in my head, I ran the whole thing myself, and I'd never really thought about doing anything else. Yeah, I think it was a time. It seemed a very hopeful time, and there felt like there were lots of opportunities. That would have been, say, in the early 80s, and I kind of stumbled through from there, really, never really thinking about doing anything different, apart from when I did get into I had the opportunity to go overseas and work directly with wildlife, and this maybe picks up on something that Isabelle was talking about as she sort of went on her journey. I realized that I preferred talking to people about those amazing experience of working directly with the wildlife rather than actually doing it myself. I realized, I thought I would, maybe I had a romantic view of it, but I thought there's going to be fantastic stuck out in the middle of whatever forest it was. And so it was mainly sort of tropical islands I was working on. So they were lovely places. But I got bored. I got bored sitting out there on my own. I wanted to be part of nature, but at the same time, I needed to have that contact with people. And what I think is so wonderful about our sector, it's not exclusive, but I think it does present opportunities for people who have very different interests. And my one definitely is around interacting with people, understanding, as Isabelle was saying, why people do what they do, because there's usually a pretty good rationale, even if you don't agree with it. And increasingly, as I went through my career, thinking about how you can help people to find common ground and work out a way forward, rather than kind of locking horns, getting into conflicts, or deciding to just sort of go off on your own. And too much of that happens in conservation, that we have individuals who say, I can't work with any of you, I'm going to go and do it myself because that's the best way to get it done. And while there's a place for mavericks and some amazing people who have done more amazing things for species recovery, I believe that if we're going to make a significant difference, a significant positive impact on the world, we've got to find ways of doing it more collaboratively than we currently do.
That's great. And an important thing that you mentioned, it's common ground. And I think that despite the difference between your perspective and Isabelle's perspective, there is a common ground between both of you, because both of you are very passionate person about nature. Both of you are very passionate people about how to do the work for conserving endangered species. And the other thing that bonds you is that you have the will to make things happen, to change the status quo and start moving as one step at a time and start working until you reach the positions that you get. And this is what leads me to the next question. And it's a very simple question that every single person in society get to do. And it's, how did your scholar program prepare you for your path?
Shall I take it? Should we alternate, Isabelle? Is that all right?
Yes, okay. Thank you for being fair. Okay, sure.
So I did my, if you're talking about sort of your training that you went through, I did my undergraduate degree at Glasgow University in zoology. And I feel like those sorts of courses are less common now, that there's a very general course around sort of life on Earth. And I feel like the courses now, university courses now, are much more sort of specialized, or they're more targeted, as they should be, towards particular career paths. But that was a great, it gave me some really useful information, but really what it did was introduce me to very cool people. And there was one guy who was like a sort of David Attenborough character. He sounded like him as well. And all he did in his lectures was show slides, because they were just slides on a slide projector, clicking through, and he'd show slides of vultures or other views of the Serengeti or some big landscape, amazing species. And I just thought, I want to be like you. Yeah, it was, and a lot of this, and I imagine you're all finding this yourselves. A lot of moving forward is about contacts, and so how it helped me was that contact with him. He got me. I did an undergraduate project on lammergeiers, on bearded vultures in Israel, which was fantastic. And he then wrote a reference for me to get a volunteer position in Mauritius, working with the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation, and that sort of started things off for me. So that initial contact through a university lecturer doing inspiring things was the door opener to me for my career. So that's really how it started. One other thing I would add is I sort of see education as like as being being part of your journey, but like going up steps. So I feel like you can go along in your life, learning, doing, being in roles, and I feel that at some point you reach a point where you think, I can't get further at the moment. I'm either getting bored, I'm not learning something new, I'm not doing something new, or I'm not able to advance unless I have something else. And that's when you decide to take on another qualification, and that lifts you up a level, and then you can work your way along, and then you can keep going. So I did my master's course much later on. I was about, it must have been 10 years after doing my undergraduate degree. But as when I knew that I needed this, it was going to help me to get further in my career and to do more. And that was in Madagascar. It was fantastic. So yeah, so thinking about the training as a sort of a door opener, but also as a sort of a lift. Maybe you kind of press the button and you go up to the next level. And that might not be in terms of sort of seniority, but in terms of your influence, your understanding, your satisfaction in the work that you are doing. Isabelle, help me out of my lift analogy.
No, your lift analogy is great. So I very much like you, Jamie. I did my university degree in zoology and conservation biology, and I think you were at that. Well, you were there to experience the birth of conservation biology, sort of in the 1980s, and that's why I think it was more generalized than what it is now. And I think the course that I took in University of Western Australia was also very generalized. We didn't have a lot of the distinction between theory and practice was quite obvious, especially kind of coming out from universities and being in the working world. And that's why we have mentorships and internships like this to help bridge the gap. But in terms of my degree, it gave me an understanding. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do yet, but I did know that through my degree, I wanted to work with endangered species, something to do with reversing human threats. And so after my degree, I sort of casted my nets and did quite a few stints in the NGO, being a campaign executive in Singapore. So that was with regards to conservation education, and then had a few laboratory internships as well at locally in A-Star doing pathology work. And maybe that was when I wanted to be a veterinarian, but also really loved the field work and being in the field, as you said. And so I kind of was stuck for a bit, thinking that maybe I need more hands-on experience. Maybe I just need another degree or a master's or even get into an academia role. to pursue a PhD, but I wasn't quite sure exactly how. So I chanced upon the Saving Endangered Species course led by Durrell Wildlife Trust, which is also an affiliation with the University of Kent. And this was led by Jamie. So we had gone back, well, 8 years back, Jamie had led this course, and also teaching pretty much kind of the same thing, but at a deeper level and a wider scale, I think. So there was a lot of practical stuff like long-term monitoring, but there was also leadership roles or how to problem-solving skills, and I was exposed to problem-solving models like fishbone analysis, problem 5 whys, so on and so forth. And that was the best 6 months, not just learning the stuff that Jamie had taught, but also being able to learn things like small population biology. But yeah, kind of coming out of that was a bit of a high for me. And then adjusting back to Singapore and or coming back from Canada and adjusting back to Singapore, finding a job and starting from scratch is really about the people you know. So I wasn't educated in Singapore, at least not for my degree. So I didn't have the connection to start with. And so it was a lot of just writing in, showing up at a professor's doorstep and asking, how can I get connected? What are the projects that I could I'm interested in this project. Would you be able to link me up with someone else? So I did a few research stints and volunteering research assistant project with telemetry and also camera trapping before it landed me into a 2-year full-time position as a biodiversity specialist in the impact assessment field. And still really wanted to do the work of conservation. So I took some time out and worked on my side gig as well. So it's never really like a linear path, isn't it? And then that had also led me back to trying for a conservation position, and just so nicely, coincidentally, that Mandai Nature was also offering a position, and so I put myself out there in the uncomfortable zone and did the interview again, and so I'm here. Yeah.
Well, what I think about this is that many of us has somehow walked the same path, because we all started with uncertainties at a school level, then find somehow a way to deal with that in the last stage of the university program, and professional development that it's meant to do every young professional. And then the important part there in the university is that it got that one person that linked you with your real passion, with that what you want to actually do with for the rest of your life, and give you that opportunity. And if you grasp that opportunity, then you got it. Then you could, develop all your scholar programs with through an MSc or a PhD. But we all get to deal with uncertainties at a very early stage, because we don't know what to do, how to do it, and we don't have a clear pathway, as many people think this university, that you got to finish your school, go to university, finish your master, finish your PhD, and then it's it. You got to figure out different ways, because we're flexible. We got to adapt in a kind of Bruce Lee way. We got to be like water. And that's pretty much what a professional is. Get to involve into the field, do the work, learn beyond what it's written in the books, and actually create criteria, our own criteria, and put our hands to work. And that it's really interesting, because despite the difference between Singapore, Venezuela, or UK, we got to walk the same way with different small difference, but in the end, we managed to do the same thing. And now I would like to start or going deeper into your work. So I would like to ask, what is biodiversity conservation planning? How do you define this concept?
Oh, I guess it's my turn, right, Jamie? We agreed. So conservation planning, I think I remember Jamie was saying something about people going off in their own roles and doing really well in their respective in situ or ex situ roles in conservation. And conservation is an umbrella that covers many, many different fields. And what it lacks in planning is that one consolidated plan and one consolidated approach, a single goal that aligns everyone. So conservation planning or in workshops, it's basically serving that principle of trying to get everybody on the same page. Whatever you're doing, we're serving that one goal of saving a single species or saving multiple species, but turning the tide against extinction for that singular species. Because you can have so many different efforts that pulls, species conservation in different direction. Research entities that have a lot of valuable data, but not being able to know how to actually reverse the threats that are or doing problem solving of threats to the species. And so in conservation planning at CPSG developed a one plan approach, the OPA, which is to marry the in situ and the ex situ approaches and aligning on the same page. Yeah, and it starts out being pretty messy, but I think the idea is to find clarity in that mess and being able to solve real world events and real world problems that you're not really being taught in a university or like a simple zoology university degree. So yeah, other than being just having your experience in education, there's just so much more to learn. Yeah. So that's what conservation planning is to me. But I believe Jamie has more to say about that, being more experience in the field.
I think you summed it up really neatly, Isabelle, and I would just sort of, I think, wrap up what you would say into two words: process and product. Conservation planning, you're there to produce something, which is the plan, the roadmap, the description of the journey that you're going to take to end up where you want to get to with whatever it is you're planning for. And it is much a process, the kind of how do you actually develop that plan, and particularly when you are involving more than yourself in the development of that plan, which most of us need to, because few of us have the power or influence, resources, or understanding alone to be able to make a good plan that then is able to be implemented. So we usually have to involve other people. And it's the design of the process that people go through in order to produce that product that is actually as important as the product itself. It's the journey and it's the relationship building that goes on that results in a plan that is most likely to be implemented.
So basically what both of you are saying, it's like it's a work done by connecting people, getting those different mindsets, getting linked between each other, and in the end, create, after going through this process, creating a tangible, a feasible product that get to generate a result, right?
Yeah, I think so. There's actually there's a great book, this one here, which I would recommend anybody gets. This one, no, you can't see it. No, you can't see it. I'll tell you what it says. It's called Getting to Maybe. Anyway, it's by a lady called Frances Wesley, who's a fantastic sort of guru of decision making, collaborative decision making in conflict resolution and things. And in that, she describes a number of case studies where people feel like there's something wrong that they don't like. Okay, they're not comfortable with it. It's not all in conservation. In fact, most of them are not. They're sort of social examples, but they want to achieve some sort of social change. And she describes the process of these people kind of bringing people around them, a bit like a bird. You know, where does a random arrangement of birds result in a flock? What happens that gets all of those birds flying in the same direction? And that planning is about bringing that flock together, so that it is kind of moving in a sort of united fashion. So I think you're right around the connections between people and a movement in a particular direction.
Great. And that being said, what do you think that motivates young people to engage in biodiversity conservation planning? Is different than it was before, or do you think that young generations have a bone for conservation nowadays?
I think there's greater awareness of conservation planning as a kind of a discipline or sub-discipline in itself than there probably would have been before, at least within the conservation space. You know, going back to the 70s and 80s, people had an idea, and this is a very crude way of putting it, so I'm not saying that this was always the case, but I think generally you had an idea, you put it into practice. I'm not saying there wasn't planning going on, but I don't think there was as much thought being put into process. How do we actually get the support around this plan to be able to make sure it's a good plan and can get implemented, as happens now? And so I think there's more talk about it. There are more opportunities around conservation planning just now. And actually, just as an aside, you know, planning sits within a 3-stage or sort of a cycle, as the Species Survival Commission describes, this sort of assess, plan, act cycle. That you're sort of working through for species. So planning sits there as the connector between recognizing there's a problem, the assessment of things that are in trouble, and the action. And so it is a very clear component now of conservation work. So in some ways, there should be more opportunities in it. In another way, I think it's harder. I think budgets are tight. And funding is limited. There are a lot more NGOs out there, but I think many of them are working with very, very little funding at all and not able to pay for people. And so I don't think it's necessarily an easy place. It's definitely a need. We know we need more people, more good people doing this sort of thing. Well, people on this call will know better than I, but I don't imagine they're feeling that it's a very easy space to find work in, without putting in an awful lot of effort. Isabelle, what would you think?
No, I do agree. I think conservation is, and like you said, it's a very great need now, and even in the global biodiversity framework of COP15, we're making much more ambitious goals than we were back then in previous COP. So the expectation is that since there's a greater need, there'll be more jobs available. But even with more jobs available, I suppose from that lens of challenges and barriers, there is quite a bit of pay discrepancies as well. Conservation jobs generally don't earn as much as high corporate roles. But there's a lot of avenue, I think, in a more positive lens for young people to dive into conservation. We are in the age of digital advancement, digital literacy, and some things that can't be replaced would be having a physical workshop, for example. I think, Jamie, you would agree. You were in the time where you had to hold workshop during a pandemic, and I heard stories about that not going well and also not going well. You can't get that interaction. Like right now, I'm just looking at myself talking. It's very different from being in a workshop. But I digress. I think there are quite a lot of opportunities for young people to get in conservation field and specialized roles in whether it's data analyst, GIS analyst, or even roles of how to bring those digital tools into physical workshops and infographics and young people are well, I'm not so young. I am kind of on the older spectrum of the young range. So, but there are a lot of younger people that are, at least in Singapore, they're starting. We have CITES Youth, Global Youth Network, for example, and it was a youth program where everybody came together to simulate a conference of parties where they did negotiations, as you said, um, and and they are strategizing for how to problem solve in wildlife trade. And this is amazing. You get people as young as 18 coming together and figuring out things about policies, wildlife policies. And I think the movement and youth are such an inspiration to older people like Jamie and I, or on a different level. So I think it's a more positive lens to this, is what I'm saying.
I think that's spot on, isn't it? And I think you're right to bring the tone up a bit, because there's a lot more variety, I think, around roles that one can go into. And I think if you're on this call and you've not got a scientific background, or you've not got a zoology background, I would not be put off at all. In fact, and I don't want to put off people who have got that background, but if you came from marketing or communications or finance or any range of sectors, the conservation world needs you and recognizes that they need you more than they did before, because we're trying to professionalize our organizations. It's not just about passion. The passion has got to be directed in some way, and that's got to be sustained. And so there's a lot more, I think there are a lot more opportunities around working in organizations to help them to function more effectively. I also think there are perhaps other sectors that you can turn to now that we couldn't do when I was younger. If you look at I think there is a blurring between the commercial sector and the not-for-profit sector, with some of the NGOs becoming more professionalized and some of the for-profit sectors moving towards being much more values-based. Something I can't remember the chap's name, but the guy from Patagonia who set up Patagonia, gifting the whole organization to generate funds on a sustainable level for conservation. It's $200 million a year, I think was the revenue from Patagonia. So that's going to be invested back into conservation work, and attached to that will be jobs. I think the impact investment sector. There are a whole range of industries as well now that need to and want to demonstrate that they are having a lighter impacts, on sometimes positive impacts, on the world around us, and that's a really refreshing move. And I think that does provide opportunities for people, whether they're coming from within the conservation sector and sitting within the NGO sector just now. I don't think you need to feel you're restricted in that space at all. I think there are more places where you can actually get meaningful work out there.
Well, that's nice. And this resonates very much with a question that Ramesh Katashira just asked. And he says, I am right now working with a policy framework for conservation, not specifically species, moreover landscapes. Now I'm fascinated to do my PhD in species conservation. How feasible is it to get PhD over species, and how are prospects after a PhD?
Well, I don't know whether I've not got a PhD, And every now and again I've thought about it at different points in my career, and decided that the trade-off wasn't worth it. I think with all these qualifications that one can get, I think it's helpful to value them in their own right. And so in terms of the prospects afterwards, I think it depends on the country and the sector that you're in. But I personally wouldn't say that getting a PhD necessarily leads to more opportunities in the conservation sector, particularly if you think about the 3 or 4 years or more years you might spend doing your PhD, how you could build your experience, build your profile, get into roles instead of going through the PhD route. That's not to put you off doing a PhD at all, because I think PhD, I would love to have gone through that learning experience, and I think it would teach you an awful lot and also give you lots of context. So I think it's a great idea, but I wouldn't see it as a necessary stepping stone to many more doors being opened, unless you're in particular countries or sectors where it requires, a PhD is required. And in terms of how feasible is it to do a PhD in species, I see no reason at all. We've got many more universities now that have biodiversity conservation, or you're talking about landscapes here, sort of broader environmental conservation qualifications and departments. So I'd have thought that there are more opportunities now rather than fewer to be able to get a PhD in or around species or other sectors. But don't feel like it's a necessary move. Do it because you want to do it. That would be my non-PhD thought. What do you think? Have you had?
I also don't have a PhD. I don't think I have the rights to be giving any advice in this sector, but I did naively think that getting a PhD or getting a master's would get me into a job of conservation. But what conservation really needs is the skills and interpersonal skills and project management that are very transferable and not necessarily just having a doctorate degree, or a doctorate, I mean. And also I did question, just from a personal point of view, I did question my motivation of why I wanted a PhD in the first place. And for me, I didn't want to be too specialized too quick. And I've also, at least from where I am in Singapore, there are a lot of PhD graduates that they're very successful in their own rights, but also graduated from a PhD and not being able to find a job that pays them as what you would expect to pay a PhD graduate as well. But pay aside, if research is your passion and you really do want to study a certain taxonomy or maybe study species conservation, then I would say that that 4 years that you spend in that degree would definitely be very, very transferable to the species conservation field, because we do need that knowledge gap to be closed. But I do agree with Jamie. I don't know if it would guarantee you a job in the conservation field. I mean, I had a fellow classmate who was an economist for 10 to 20 years and decided to jump on a conservation career, and he's now a working conservationist in the UK. And I've also had a very brave friend who was in the finance scene for about a decade or so, and she's now a practicing vet who does conservation on the side. So yeah.
Well, thanks guys for sharing your insights with Ramesh. I hope that this helps him with his professional or academical path. And now, with harsh questions, I would like to know if there are or the opportunities are equally, or how do you perceive opportunities in conservation planning? Are they equally distributed across disciplines? Let's say biology, geography, vets. Are there barriers for young people to get into this? What are your thoughts about this?
Do you want me to go? I'll go first, Isabel. That messes with it, doesn't it? Because I've changed the routine now. But anyway, keeps it fresh. Well, actually, what I'll do is I'll try and also answer anonymous attendees' question as well around the skills for a good basis to start. Participants here will know more of the barriers because you may be facing them. I cannot say whether there are more planning opportunities in the veterinary side or any other side. Just as an aside, where one of the training courses that we run is on wildlife disease risk analysis. So if you are interested in the veterinary side and how you do conservation planning, definitely decision making on that side of things, then go and have a look at that course at our website. But I do think that there are ways in which you can reduce the barriers and make yourselves more attractive, whichever sector you are looking at, and is referred to some of the skills before around problem solving, around leadership and management, around facilitation. If you look at this, and there have been a few papers published on this in recent years, the gaps that there are within the conservation sector, and the key gaps that are coming out include the ones that I've just described around communication as well. There are technical gaps around GIS and other sorts of analytical tools that and skills that are needed, but a lot of what is required that would get you into some of those sectors that Ilab was describing are some of the I would describe them more as sort of transferable skills rather than soft skills around management, leadership, facilitation, process design. How do you actually help groups to make a decision or to develop a plan? Those are sorts of skills. I am biased because that's the sort of space I work in, but I do think that that's what employers are looking for. Are those sorts of transferable skills that can help them solve problems and make decisions.
Right.
Yeah. I think before jumping on this facilitation development path, I have to be completely honest. I didn't know that the role of a facilitator actually exists as an expertise. And even getting into the job, I was discussing with my wonderful mentor, Rupali, that you don't really understand what you're getting into until you are at a physical workshop facilitating. And so I don't know if I can answer the questions if the opportunities are equally distributed across the sectors, but I think maybe the question about impact really hits you at a later stage in your career. You could be trying all sorts of different fields to fit your resume and finding what you like and what you don't like, what you want to do, 20 years down the road. But I'm not trying to say that your job should be your passion, but a job can be your passion. And so the question of impact really hit me when I was, I guess, being in the field for so long and questioning what impact does this have in the conservation field? How do I actually go out to do more work? And that had led me to do a people-centric job that I never envisioned myself being a part of. So I'm not as good with people as Jamie is.
I think, Isabelle, you're fantastic at it and interpreting what people are saying, and and listening, which is, I think, core skills for effective conservation professionals. Elad, I don't know whether now's a reasonable time to share the results of the survey, but thank you very much to many of you who completed the survey before this webinar, which was looking for your advice really on establishing a small internship program. This isn't something global. Well, it would be international, but it's not something that's sort of suddenly there are going to be hundreds of places. We're looking at developing a small internship program, but we're not sure whether or not it would be of value. And so this seemed like a really good audience to sort of check with. And I'll just very briefly share with you the results, partly to show you that that they have made, they have been listened to, and we're going to think about them more internally. So CPSG has been thinking about this internship program where where individuals would be selected in some way to be able to participate as an intern, where they would be given a work package that would involve skills development for them, kind of aspects of work that needed to be done that they could take ownership over, so they could produce something by the end of their internship and develop their career potential, I suppose, as a consequence. And based on the results of the survey, the 41 people who responded to this anyway, 5 is really positive, 1 is negative. So most people everybody who responded feels like this would be a really good idea to have such a placement program being developed. There was a sense that the time frame, the most appropriate time frame, was probably sort of several months, a year maybe sometimes, but it was felt that probably would be too long, weighing up the benefits of gaining some experience with the costs of not being able to do other things. So a few months seem to be what you feel the internship, the placement program should really look like. And here's just an illustration of some of the written feedback that was provided, but it seems to be reflected in other comments that people made. A placement of 3 to 6 months seems to strike a good balance. And that seemed to be quite a common feeling. There was much greater variation in your sense as to whether such a program should be linked to a university course. There were slightly more people who thought very much yes, but there were also it was quite well spread across the options. So you were a bit unsure about that. And I think these comments sort of sum it up nicely. I don't feel strongly about linking the program to a university course because it risks excluding early career professionals or people making career changes. So this was, I think, this again, a general sense you had that it's a good idea to give that opportunity, but be wary of sort of excluding others who might then not be able to take advantage of it. You did feel very strongly that it should be funded in some way, and as I mentioned, I think in the survey, for those of you who completed it, we're not in a position to be able to, at least not at the moment, to be able to kind of give sort of a salary for that role. But that's partly why we thought about a university link, because they can sometimes access funding to cover the students' costs. But we would look at covering costs if you were going to a workshop and things like that, to be able to cover travel, etc., costs involved. You feel like it should be linked to some funding. It's extremely important. Here are just a few of the comments. Unpaid placements risks excluding talented people. Even if funding is partial, some form of financial support helps ensure equities, attract strong candidates, etc. So you feel that there should be some recompense for people's role within the program, or at least them not being out of pocket from being part of such a program. And you also gave some other ideas about what we should think about, flexibility of entry, as we talked about already, clear expectations and mentoring support, and this sort of idea of equity in access to it. There is a mention at the bottom around making a short course available to people within the internship program, and actually something that we will be doing by the end of this year and into the start of next, as well as the longer courses that we currently run online. We will be starting to launch a series of much shorter courses, which will be easier to access and easier to get completed, that cover conservation planning in different shapes or forms. So thank you very much for that, for completing that survey. And we will take those results and think about them as we go further in developing the program. Ilad, back to you.
Thanks, Jamie, for sharing the result of the poll. We're running out of time, so I'm gonna make one last questions out of the list. And it's about engagement for planning, for young people engagement. And it's basically, are there a platform within the CPSG or the SSC where young professionals can participate in decision making, developing capacities? How do young professionals can do a meaningful contribution to conservation planning, and what are the skill sets that they would need?
Isabelle, do you want to take that one to start with?
Yeah, I think we are talking about what are the transferable skills that are needed for conservation planning as well. So aside from, and I honestly wish I had known this a lot earlier in my career, and maybe I could have started to take courses to develop those skills. So there are quite a number of free courses to do project management. So project management is one, how to manage your stakeholders is another that is very transferable across all different fields, even in your research industry as well. Being able to, if you're doing a social study, or being able to manage your relationship with the people you work with and the people outside your organizations. Listening and communication skills is another. There are many different books that you can get resources from. Data science and GIS, and I think in just keeping abreast with current events of conservation. I think what I usually do is read all the open access journals, follow great conservationists around that have those that are inspiring on LinkedIn. There's also a book that summarizes conservation history all the way from the past up to now. I think it's Conservation Biology for All. You can download that from the Society of Conservation Biology, if I'm not wrong. It's a journal that I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with. Yeah, so that's in terms of the leadership and development path. Jamie, I'll leave it to you to answer that.
Well, I mean, I don't know how Ilad may be better placed, and Ibu might be better placed to be able to talk about the broader sort of IUCN, what other options there are available within CPSG. Our capacity development is very much focused around species conservation planning, and ultimately having more species covered by more effective conservation plans. So our training really focuses on those areas, and we run a suite of online extended training programs around about 7 units long. They take around about 7-8 weeks or so to complete. And I think Justin kindly shared a link to the site, so please go and have a look. As I mentioned, there will be other shorter courses coming online, which may help with some of these more generic needs around just facilitation in general, and other topics as well, that people might find useful. We do run a mentorship program, which is separate from the placement program we're talking about, which is on. It's at the moment, it's not an open program. We are looking for particular people who are in positions who are able to do more species conservation planning. But as the program grows and more people kind of graduate, I suppose, from the program, then hopefully there are more mentors out there who can help others. And I did wonder whether I could actually just answer Lex's question, because I think Lex's was the last one that was there. Because what you describe around dealing with navigating egos and politics is, I think that's humans, isn't it? We're all full of ego in some way, shape, or form. We either have big or small egos, but we've got it, a sense of self. And politics is about people. So wherever you've got people, there are going to be these complexities that are added. And I think the navigation to that comes through using and developing and using your interpersonal skills, which we talked about near the beginning, and complementing those with process design. How do you actually help people, how to structure decision-making processes, discussions, meetings, so that those with big egos get leveled out with those that have got small egos, so everybody is able to contribute equally and able to feel as if their voice has been included and valued in the ultimate decision. We have this all the time. I think it's very possible to navigate those concerns and come and do some of our training, and then you'll be able to do it.
Well, that being said, I just get to thank you guys because we actually are at the top of the hour. I get so many questions for you, but time is ruthless and it keeps passing by. So thanks for sharing your experience with all the audience. You can connect either with Isabelle or Jamie through their emails, social media, or if you want, you can enroll at the CPSG planning training program. Thanks really about all the comments in the chat box. You received many good vibes. People all around the world joined today for hearing your perspective, your insights about how young professionals get to engage into conservation planning. So I think we can make something out of it, particularly after the result of the poll. And that being said, thanks again for everyone who joined the session. Thanks, Isabelle. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Justin, Ibuku, all the team. It was possibly just because of you.
Thank you, Elad, and everybody, and Justice and Ibuku. Very nice to meet you guys from all over the world, and see you next time. And I do encourage everyone to put yourself in very uncomfortable situations like this. Take care.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks,
Bye
guys.
for now.
And see you next time.